Is journalism dead or just entering a new chapter? Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
Hey, it's great to be here wearing the same clothes I wore yesterday.
That's the way to do it. And Blaze News investigative journalist Steve Baker, kind enough to stick around as well.
I've slept in this building several times.
He is not lying about that, I can tell you, because there are so many things that are happening and so many investigative pieces that Blaze has put out. And we need to look back at what we've done, how we've gotten here, and where we want to go with all of these investigations. And there have been so many stories that, Matt, it's hard to keep up sometimes.
Yeah, everything's happening all the time. Everything is happening all the time. That's the change. That's the new era in which we live. But today's episode is really, the season recap before we hit season 2, because what's happening in a lot of the stuff that we've been looking at, a lot of stuff Steve's been looking at, is that really the first season is over in the sense that, pre-Trump taking over, things were very different. And now, after the first 6 months of the Trump administration, you see, okay, this is the end of that era. The new era is coming, and the new era is very exciting because we're now in charge.
Yeah, and let's start with January 6th, going into that new era, because we know that there's a new J6 subcommittee, and Steve's come on the show and talked about that. So hit a little bit on that, but then also just tell people why you and Joe Hanneman and others here are the expert, but mainly, since we have you here, tell your story.
Yeah, there's not only just a new J6 Select subcommittee. It has been approved. Congress still has to vote for the resolution before it's actually officially enacted. That'll take place when they get back home from their August recess. But assuming that everything goes the way that Congress and the committee hopes it's going to go, this is going to be an era of new life for us in our investigations. We have been told, and when I say we, those of us who are investigative journalists who have been waiting for a lot of unanswered questions related to January 6th, we've been told we're going to get the pieces of the puzzle finally to finish that puzzle. And that's what I'm most excited about. Now, I will tell you there are still obstacles. There are still limitations to what they're being given access to, which is mind-boggling. Even with the new administration, we will be talking about that very, very soon and extensively, and we'll be holding people's feet to the fire who are prohibiting us from getting what we need. Those obstacles still exist. I'm not going to get into the specificity.
Some obstacles have an R next to their name.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. Yeah. If it was just the Democrats, we could be, screaming bloody murder from the rooftops right now. But it's not. It's when you're being hampered by the home team, so to speak, it becomes much harder to deal with in a manner that, because you still want to root for your home team guys. You still want to play nice with them. You still want to have the access sometimes that you need as a journalist to learn what they're finding out. But when they are acting as the obstructionists, there comes a point where we have to call them out. Now, that said, I just got back from D.C. yesterday, and as a matter of fact, I spent time not only with congressional staffers working on the new committee, who are working while their bosses are home, but I also spent time with people from other offices in the DOJ, as well as other investigative agencies that are specifically focusing on January 6th. So there's a harmonic kind of convergence taking place among the various Trump-appointed agencies because Trump wants an investigation into January 6th. He wants to know why it started, who lit that match that day, and then he also wants to be sure that we know the weaponization side of it so that it can be prevented from happening again.
This is why it's so exciting, where we're at right now, because even as you say, there's still a deep state, an administrative state that is hiding everything. There are still Republicans who are Republicans in name only and not on your side, as you all know. And that's all there. But the other end of it is, we now have people who care about the truth in places of power who will fight alongside and in conjunction with journalists. And just coming back from the Lincoln Fellowship with Claremont, I gave a little spiel about this as people from the administration and outside were all talking about the Golden Age agenda. And my point was, you don't shape an administration, and policy without working with media. The other side has done this since time immemorial. So you work with the New York Times and Washington Post. That's your carrot and stick if you're within an administration to, punish bad actors and hopefully try to, actually implement the agenda you think you were elected there for. So now the fights are starting, and now all of a sudden, you need media in order to shape the direction of any administration, because there's always disagreement. And now we have this big, beautiful coalition that's also going to start fighting. And now we are in that position of, being where the New York Times or Washington Post was in the past, where, there's a dance there. There's a dance to go back and forth with information and tips and so forth.
And think about what you just said and then what I said before that. I actually admitted to playing on the same team. All right.
Yeah.
Because from a philosophical, political standpoint, we do have a goal, an America First agenda that we subscribe to, and yet when you bring up the access that the New York Times and the Washington Post and everybody else used to have, they had that access, but they did it in a way without admitting the truth that they were on that team.
This is really important stuff actually to talk about, right? In public, in front of an audience. It's ridiculous to think that anyone who runs a news agency, isn't inclined to one team or another. That's crazy. There's no objectivity. You work with the people that you can get more out of, right? The people you think are doing the right thing. But if you're in charge of anything in media, or you're just in charge of your own story, right? What's guiding you is what you think the truth is.
Right.
And what you think the truth is going to differ depending on your right or left. And when you're doing that, you actually do have an aim of shaping the administration to get them to do the right things. So there's a kind of statesmanship to media, to journalism.
Right.
And I feel like the interesting thing right now is that, obviously we're not in the position of the old Washington Post or New York Times in terms of resources and all that, but we are in that same position in terms of our stance outside, hitting the base, hitting the people who vote MAGA Maha, and trying to help them understand what the hell is going on, and shining a light on bad actors, et cetera. So, it's like 6 months in, all of a sudden, as we all know now is the time where people start to leak.
Yes, and Matt, I want to go through just your point with, if you're not supposed to have any bias in there, well, where do you learn that? You learn that when you're in college, in journalism school. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. We have a big problem. All of the colleges in this country have huge problems. And that's who's pumping all this stuff out, who's trying to say, we're objective. We don't have any bias. We're just going to go through and play things straight down the line. And we know we haven't gotten that for decades now.
No, we haven't gotten that. But we also, again, on this exact same point, is that the Blaze is in a very unique position right now because 6 months later, those very publications you mentioned, they're calling us for information now.
Yes.
Well, as they should be.
Difference.
Because when you go through and you have different J6 stories, we can get into some of them. Let's start with, the Aaron Blacks and the Harry Dunns of the world. Just to go through, if we're going to do our season recap, Aaron Black, Nancy Pelosi's fixer, as she's known, that they definitely had to come to Blaze because you guys were the ones that had the story.
Yeah, and his name came up while I was in D.C. This is a name that's going to be looked at. And look, we're announcing that right now on television, but he already knows that. I mean, the way he responded, Aaron Black, Nancy Pelosi's precious, as I renamed him, not just his fixer. But the point being is that the day after our story came out, he began removing everything from his social media, particularly the cover headlines in his title, which he called himself Senior Advisor at Nancy Pelosi. Or Team Pelosi, rather. So he started removing all of that. Well, there's a reason for that. We now have, because of the new access that this new administration has given us, we are now actually seeing his name popping up in some documents that we'd never had access to before. That's pretty much all I can say about that right now. But there's more coming on Aaron Black. I'm very excited about it. But that leads us to other stories as well. I told somebody on Capitol Hill yesterday. I said, I will go to my grave. I'll either solve this riddle or they'll kill me in the process of solving it. And that is who suborned the perjury of Harry Dunn and David Lazarus in the Oath Keepers trial. I want to know that.
I love it. Matt always says, I just have to go through and keep you alive. That's my job now.
Yeah, my job is to keep both of them alive. It's a lot harder than you'd think. But right now it's easy. But the reason that it will become harder is because these stories are going to deepen. And, when it comes to January 6th, the big question that everyone wants to know is how did this thing actually start? It's what Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, wants to know. And it's what the audience wants to know. And really the thrust of your work since you were there on that day, walking around, recording things, noticing things, is, what did cause it. And so, if we look at the season recap of what we've done so far, the first thing was we had to keep stories about J6 alive in general, right? Because, Daily Wire wasn't going to touch that. Fox, since Tucker, right? I mean, since Tucker left, that was one of the last things he did was some stuff on January 6th. No one else was going to do it. And so it seemed to me like the whole reason I'm here, and that came out to blaze, is that so we could do stories like this. And I think it's the same with you, Steve. So it was obvious you came, you sort of look at some particular stories. We should recap with those stories though real quick. So Aaron Black is one of them, but remind people like Aaron Black, Nancy Pelosi's fixer, okay, but what do we know about him?
What we know about Aaron Black is that his name first popped up in the American consciousness when Project Veritas did a sting operation in 2016, in which they worked their way in with it was interesting, they worked their way in with an alleged intern who she was posing as an intern, acting as an intern, and in this particular far-left organization, activist organization, Democracy Defenders or Democracy Partners, one of those two. And in that process of her infiltrating that organization, she met Aaron Black, and of course she had the hidden camera going. And when they introduced, when the head of the organization introduced her to Aaron Black, he said, "Oh yeah, I'm kind of the guy that nobody's supposed to know about." Well, really, what do you do? He goes, "Well, like the violence at Chicago, at the Trump rally in Chicago," he goes, "Those were my people." Right there, they caught him on that. Well, he actually first presented himself.
I think this is your phrase. You had a better one than this. He's a professional riot instigator.
That's what he is.
He organizes protests and riots.
And if you go all the way back to Occupy Wall Street, he was one of the principal organizers of that movement back in 2012. And so through our sources, we were able to learn about him. He was not a name on our radar. Nobody's radars. I'm talking about anybody doing any investigations into January 6th whatsoever. This was a name that never came up. And we actually had...
Because he's a professional, Steve. His name doesn't come up.
Right.
And that means he's doing a good job.
But you know what it took? It took a foreign intelligence source, a European intelligence source, to whisper in my ear, and he gave me two names, and one of those names was Aaron Black. And he said, "You need to look into this guy related to January 6th. And I said, "What about him?" He said, "Just look him up. And then come back to me, and I'll try to fill in the holes for you." And so that's what we did. And all of a sudden, holy cow, who is this guy? So we obviously did a deep dive into him, and we set that up as part one, and there will be a part two, especially with the access that we have now.
So the Aaron Black story is, it really should have more traction. It did a traction where the ones broke it, but this is someone who you would expect to find right behind the most nefarious interpretation of January 6th. This is someone whose job it is to instigate these kinds of events, and he works as Nancy Pelosi's, fixer or precious, as you said. Okay. Harry Dunn is another one that's really important, but just remind people who Harry Dunn is and where that rabbit trail leads.
Harry Dunn is the most famous Capitol Police officer in the history of the Capitol Police, and that is a direct result of his activities and his telling of January 6th, post-January 6th. to the media and in his book. He is a storyteller.
And he's still doing tours right now.
He's still
to this day.
Yeah, he's still out there doing.
He's keeping J6 alive.
He is.
Right.
He is.
Well, you know, okay.
Hero of January 6th, yes.
There's a lot of people that don't understand why J6 is important, and you mentioned already. Once Fox fired Tucker Carlson, they abandoned it. Daily Wire never got on it whatsoever. There were some other smaller media outlets who did, but by and large, everyone abandoned it because they didn't understand it first, and then they also were scared of it second. And the people who have never abandoned it are the people like, I don't know, Scott MacFarlane from CBS. Never lets it go. He still reports J6 News to this day. And it's because that side knows how important that narrative victory was to them. And I wrote this in the very first column that I wrote. I wrote a 9,000 word, not page, column.
You have 9,000 pages up in your head, though.
Yeah, in my head. But 9,000 words the week after January 6th. And one of the things that I said in that column was that was the largest narrative victory that the left has ever scored in the history of the United States as a result of the people that made the mistakes of getting involved in violence that day. Now we got to figure out why they got involved in violence, who sparked it. Those things are ongoing. So now we're to Harry Dunn. And one of the things that Harry Dunn is he was one of the most successful tools of the narrative of Nancy Pelosi's famous phrase that we have to establish and preserve the narrative of that day. That was an exact quote from Nancy Pelosi a year later. And Dunn has been a useful idiot in that process because he's not only willing to follow the narrative, but he's willing to say any lie whatsoever to advance that agenda. And one of the most successful things that we've done is that our team, this has been a team effort here, is we've been able to spend more time in the Capitol CCTV viewing room than any other news organization in this country. And in so doing, what we did is we did a track and we did a day in the life of Harry Dunn. And Harry Dunn's testimonies to the January 6th Select Committee, the original one, his testimonies in trials, his book reports, what he wrote in his biography. There's more lies than there are truths told in every one of those situations, and we were able to establish that by the video evidence, not by conjecture or just, we didn't believe the guy. No, it was a lot more than that.
So the next season of J6 here on Blaze TV is going to be great. You can see it setting up right now.
Yeah, so all the Harry Dunn story led to who was coaching him. I mean, this is your point all along. Who was coaching this guy? Who made him change his story? Who massaged his story about what happened? And, that came from the FBI, right? Or the DOJ?
FBI and DOJ, one and the same in that post-January 6th operation.
So one of your white whales, if I can use a
That's
literary reference from
go.
Moby Dick, but no one reads anymore, so why do I do that? I don't know. But what you're chasing here is who was managing him and who was managing the person who was managing him.
And I think that when we get to that story, we're going to find out just how corrupt the DOJ operation was. Think about this. On the day of the verdict of the first Oath Keepers trial, when they were found guilty, and a couple of them were found guilty of seditious conspiracy, the first time in my God, how long that an American citizen was found, 100 years since an American citizen had been found guilty of seditious conspiracy. And on that evening, I went with the defense lawyers to one restaurant, where everybody went to lick their wounds and drink away their sorrows after the loss. The prosecution team went to another fancy restaurant in D.C., and Politico reported the next morning that none other than Merrick Garland himself showed up and bought him a nice, expensive bottle of champagne. Now, I'm going to tell you something. That's not what a Department of Justice needs to be celebrating. That's not it. This is beyond the differences of opinion of how January 6th happened and what you think about the Oath Keepers. And by the way, when I say that, I say what you think you know about the Oath Keepers. You don't know. But regardless of that, that's not something where the Attorney General of the United States shows up and celebrates people that are about to go to prison for 20 years.
And these are the answers that we're about to get, Jill. I mean, the thing is now all of a sudden there's a real hope that we actually find out who some of these people are.
Yes, there will be so much more to come here on Blaze TV. Well, I used to think that I knew what I was buying at the grocery store until I found out that over 4 billion pounds of meat were imported to the U.S. just last year. Maybe we need to go through and deport some cows. But that's when I started thinking, you know what? We really do need to look at what we're buying. And you need to go to goodranchers.com, because if all these labels can say product of the United States when the meat wasn't even raised here, then what other games are they playing? Goodranchers.com, though, their meat is 100% American. It's born, raised, and harvested right here on local farms, and it's delivered straight to your door. And let me tell you, I'm a subscriber myself. It's worth every penny. And you can get $40 off a box, free shipping, and a free gift in every order for life. You can get the bacon, seed oil-free chicken nuggets, Wagyu burgers. You can even change it month to month. And if you're worried about signing up for a subscription, don't be, because you can pause it, you can delay it, you can cancel it at any time. There's no stress, no lock-in. It's all very flexible, and thousands of people have already made the switch. They have amazing reviews. So go to goodranchers.com to see what everybody's talking about, and use my code Jill, and you'll get $40 off plus free meat for life with your subscription. It's goodranchers.com. Welcome to the table. Steve, I know that you have a lot of J6 news that you cover, but there was one fateful day back in April where Matt and I called you up on the phone and we said, we have another story we want you to look into. There's a congressman down in Florida, and his name is Cory Mills. And Matt, there's a lot of stuff that's going on with this guy.
Yeah, so this is everyone's favorite in a way because it's so amusing and it's so colorful, you know. I mean, it shouldn't be funny, but it is a case study in how corrupt this republic has become, that someone like this is allowed to stay in office, someone like this made it to office, and has been allowed to just run amok for this long. So, I mean, this starts with the marriage and the radical Muslim, officiant of his marriage, but it ends in, we don't know where it quite ends yet, but it ends with money bags being delivered to him and him, allegedly committing felonies by threatening some of the many women that he's been with and blackmailing them.
But we didn't know all that when we called Steve on the phone. We only knew the radical mufti had married him. There's a lot of shady business dealings going on. And Steve was like, all right, take it or leave it. Another shady congressman. And then the FBI got involved, and Steve goes, oh, I'm in.
That was absolutely the truth. We've talked about it on this program before, is that this was not a story I had any interest in whatsoever. I wouldn't even say that it was on my beat. It was really something that I went, okay, well, that's cool. But the reality is that as I began to read through what you guys were sending me, I started to see some things that were, we'll just say, anomalous. And the biggest anomaly in the process was the alleged investigation by an alleged FBI agent in Florida who was allegedly investigating Cory Mills, the congressman.
Keeping the lawyers happy today, Steve.
Right, I've had to learn how to do this, and what we discovered is that our own sources in the story, who you guys were introducing me to, were being interviewed by an FBI agent under the auspices that she was investigating Cory Mills. But the more I looked into it and the more we talked to them, the more they felt like they were the target of the investigation. And so that's when all of a sudden my radar went off and I dove in. Well, I've been all full in ever since. And again, if we talk about why this story is important, there are naysayers online. Look, since our story released a couple of days ago, the most recent story about the we'll call it the sextortion of a reigning beauty queen in Florida, a GOP activist down there, a girlfriend of his for over 3 years that overlapped not only his marriage but also overlapped a live-in girlfriend in D.C. at the same time.
Plus more.
More coming there as well, and so we've had people that have reacted and said we don't care about Congressman's sex life. We don't care about who they're sleeping with. We don't care about ugly breakups. I went, no. My response every single time has been, this is not about a breakup. This is not about an adultery. This is not about a guy's sex life. This is felony. These are felonies being committed here. Just start with the sextortion itself. The fact that this man would in fact extort her based on the fact that he had compromised photos and videos of her.
Well, and it's a pattern that we see from Cory when we go through and we interviewed him, right? Peter Giedel, our reporter, talked to Cory on the phone for 50 minutes. When we reached out for comment on our very first story about being married by the radical mufti, we asked the congressman what his religion was, and did this guy marry you? And he went on for 50 minutes in a tirade and just went through and how dare you reach out to my wife, my ex-wife, and ask her for comment? Don't you know that her father and her brother died? Well, that was nearly 20 years ago. Like, we're sorry that they died. Obviously, like, we're not taking any delight in that. But is it not fair to ask her any of these questions? And he's doing the same thing time and time and time again. You take something and you twist it and you become the victim, which he has publicly said on interviews that he hates when Democrats do it. And yet we see this where there is one set of rules, for everybody else, and then a completely different set of rules for him himself.
He's always the victim. I mean, and what he's saying to Peter was absolutely crazy. You can't ask me about my marriage because it upsets my wife, because it brings back memories or whatever the hell. I mean, and then with this girl, the beauty queen, you have him actually having. I mean, you tweeted about this, Jill. I mean, you have him actually taking the girlfriend that broke up, that made this girlfriend an ex, right? Yeah. She found out about this girl up north, domestic, dispute. She says for a hot second he was beating me, and she finds out that this girl is with him. And then she's like, "Okay, I'm done," and leaves. And then he has her call.
Like I put on X.
I can't even describe this.
Maybe you shouldn't have your DC girlfriend call your ex-Florida girlfriend to try to get her to kill the story. Maybe we shouldn't use that phone, but Cory was blocked on all the other numbers and he was desperate. And what did he do? Oh, let's use the other girlfriend's phone.
And then the line was, you can't do this because think of his son. Think of his children. Yes. It was the side piece, I think, saying, number one, saying, hey, think of his son. Like, what the hell? Like, it revolves around him. But the important thing is, and it was crazy when I saddled Steve with this whole Mills thing, because I knew you were like, well, I have a lot on my plate. What the hell is this? But ultimately, there is something connected to that FBI story going on here.
Well, there's much. This story is going to go infinitely deeper than what we have revealed so far. This is not the story of domestic violence and sextortion and multiple affairs. Overlapping girlfriends and mistresses while he's married, and it's not even the story of him being married by a radical mufti in the most radical mosque in America. Those are all interesting stories, but we had a precursor to this story when we saw what he did in Syria back in April, when this congressman got into a private car and drove from Damascus to Beirut on a highway and across a border where both sides of the border are controlled by Hezbollah. And he did so with no security, and he did it with locals, and somehow he managed to make that trip without any worries, concerns, problems, because at the end of this investigation, the one thing we're going to learn, just like with J6, is who makes these things happen. Who's the controller? Who's the handler? Who is the facilitator? And I think we're going to find out in this story there's an invisible hand at play.
Yeah, because we have someone. Why is this FBI agent doing this? she friends with him in some way, right? Or why is she referencing a Department of Defense investigator? Gosh, I've heard that phrase before. So why is that happening? That's the real story, and that's something that I think we will find out at least a lot more about in the coming months. But I have a question for Jill on this. Your trajectory on this, it's not just, when as this story was unfolding, did you have a couple moments when you knew early on, oh my gosh, this rabbit hole goes a long way?
Well, Matt, I think when I took the printed out documents and came over to your house, knocked on your door, and I said, I have something that you need to see here.
That was number one.
That was absolutely number one, because the radical mufti just set off all sorts of alarm bells in my head, going, okay, how does this happen? How does nobody talk about this? I just looked at that. And then when we brought Steve in to the story, and then we said, wait a minute, there's a potential rogue FBI agent. And we get an actual statement from the FBI. Steve and I were on the phone. I was going to fly out of here and take the weekend off to go hang out with one of my friends. And I said, oh my gosh, Steve, they gave us the statement. Like, we're right about this. Like, we actually, we knew that this was the case. Yeah. But the FBI just confirmed to us. And that's when I knew that we weren't just dealing with a regular, this is a bad thing. Like, no, there are so many levels to this story. We didn't know how far we were going to have to go down this rabbit hole, but it has become we can do this all day, really. We can keep going, because there are so many different things. This story is never boring.
Not a lot of people start international arms companies with, whatever access to capital. We still don't know what that means.
Yeah, with access to over $200 million in Iraqi money to begin their funding. But, even before that, and this is the incredible part, is not only do we have all of these threads we're having to pull, there's so many different avenues and so many different pathways that we've got to navigate in the Cory Mills story. But the one and the biggest and the most overriding aspect of him is that he is either a habitual or a pathological liar. And we've been able to identify this going all the way back to, obviously, the stolen valor things, the early 2000s, his time in the Army, through his time with private contractors like DynCorp, but then even more recently, when he was beginning his company, he's fundraising for the company by telling the lies about his CV. He's telling people that he has a master's degree from American Military University, and we have the letter from AMU saying, no, he doesn't.
And all of the things with Islam will get even more murky, because I'll go out and I have a podcast that's coming out on Monday where somebody on that podcast, and I'll tweet it all out, I'll share all the information with everybody. But Cory Mills had told 5 people back in 2014, the year that he got married, that he had converted to Islam. Now, Cory tells us he's still a Christian. Sometimes he's a Catholic. Sometimes he's a Protestant, word of faith. You never know what you're going to get with him. But on that podcast that'll drop on Monday, we'll have more of the Cory women in his life. And Cory, I guess, goes through and just tells them, there's not a lot of difference between Islam and Christianity. And you can kind of just go back and forth. So the story will continue. It's never over with this one. Even when it is, I don't even know. Something else might pop up. Somebody else will jump into our DMs and tell us even more.
But again, why is this story important beyond even what we've talked about before? Right. Why is it? Do you know why? You know why this story is important? Because this is just one example of the endemic problem in D.C. This is not an isolated problem. Now, he may be the worst of the bunch, and he's sticking out like a sore thumb right now.
Certainly, he's colorful, so that makes it an attractive story.
Right.
But he is a symbol of everything that's wrong with Washington, D.C.
And the problem with him is that he's not a good con man. He's not good at covering his trail. And there are much smarter individuals on Capitol Hill who may be doing just as bad or worse, who are much smarter at covering their trails.
Yeah. So my answer to you, why is this story important? Well, Cory is the chairman of the Oversight and Intelligence Committee on Foreign Affairs in the House. And so that means that he has a lot of access to a lot of documents and can make a lot of big decisions when it comes to national security. and we need to get to the bottom of it. The cover-up on Blaze TV. If you haven't watched it yet, you're missing something big. It's a docuseries that lays out how the government and public health agencies actually lied to you during COVID. We go through the origins of the virus to the lockdowns, all the vaccine narrative, and how big tech helped cover everything up. We know it wasn't about public health. It was actually more about information warfare. And if you've missed the first 4 episodes, go through, binge them all right now, because the 5th episode just dropped it. It's called Muckraker, and it breaks down the pandemic industrial complex. It goes through and shows how Fauci and Birx and all the government bureaucrats work together with social media platforms to silence the truth. It's not just censorship. This is about mind control. You can check out all 5 episodes right now at FauciCoverup.com/mandate and get $20 off your subscription. It's FauciCoverup.com/mandate. Guys, with the time that we have left, let's go ahead and look to the future, because we've been looking at all of the things that we wanted to get done, and J6, Cory Mills, but there are still so many things that we will be looking into with Blaze Media. So what are some of the investigations that you guys are wanting to still dive into, or even if it's something that we've touched before, you want to know more information on?
Well, the biggest thing I think that's happened in the last, if we're doing a recap of the last year anyway, is there was a couple of assassination attempts of our current president right now, who was then, of course, the candidate for the presidency back at the time of those assassination attempts. And we're learning more about those individuals and the principal characters involved then than we knew now. And a lot of this information that we're learning, once again, the superstar in the Trump administration right now keeps coming back to Tulsi Gabbard's desk. And I will tell you that I met with some of her own people yesterday, or the day before yesterday, rather, in D.C., and they are gushing. These are people that work for her. They're gushing about how resolute she is, and there's the amazement in their faces when they talk about her is you never see that from anybody else when they talk about their, whether you're talking to the staff members of a congressman or you're talking with somebody that works at the FBI or works for one of the other agencies. You don't see this type of effusive praise that you get when you talk to them about Tulsi. And she is the one that's producing the results as a result of that. So she's not only infecting her own staff and her own team with her own resoluteness to get to the bottom of these things, that as a result, she's producing these results. And one of the things that we're going to see results from, probably coming from her office, I can't imagine that they're going to come from anywhere. I can't imagine they're going to come from Secret Service. I don't believe anything's going to come out of FBI of anything substantial right now. But if we get it from Secret Service or FBI, it's going to be as a result of the work that DNI has done through her team at the DIG being the Directors Initiative Group is what they call it. And that's a directive from the president, again, himself, to get to the bottom of these certain things. And this, obviously, the president is interested in what happened in those assassination attempts against his own life.
And we know that Tulsi Gabbard, DNI, has been the one in charge leading this document dump of all the Russiagate information. That's what we've already seen. And we've seen headlines, Steve, that there are whistleblowers that are saying, I want to go directly to Gabbard because I actually believe and trust her. Yep. And they are going directly to her and giving her the information. So, because we know how bad the deep state is, they don't know, can I go to my superior over here? Do I go to this boss over there? I don't know where to go. You know who I'm going to go to? I'm going to go to Tulsi Gabbard because I can trust her.
Right. They do trust her because of what she's doing. She's the one producing results, just as you said. And they're not going to trust the agency who has, I almost used a bad word on the air, that has treated their whistleblowers with contempt.
Yeah, you asked, why is this story important? And my hesitation was simply because I thought, well, should I say that on air? But part of the reason the Cory Mills story is important, and all these stories are important, is because we need to know exactly how many people in Washington, D.C. Are assets, either formally or effectively, of some part of our government or other governments. And this is a big issue. If you have an administrative state, don't take this in a sort of conspiratorial way, but if you have an administrative state that's in charge of dispensing, trillions of dollars, billions and billions every year, and it wants to survive, it doesn't want anything to attack it, right? People want to keep their jobs. A small fraction of that could go, be laundered to help someone run for office in Congress, right?
Right.
A small fraction of that could ensure that you would control the votes of someone in Congress. The levers are tiny. You don't even need to do that much for a lot of these people. In fact, you would ensure that Congress was always feckless and would always do your bidding. And you have all the resources in the world to do that. You have money. You have technology that allows you to see a lot of things that most people aren't allowed to see. And this story about how the agenda is implemented, how the mandate is implemented, is a story about if you can overpower that administrative state. And if it's the case, people are learning this now. USAID, right? People are learning like, oh my gosh, all that money went to all this media stuff, and that really had an impact. And so the question here is, can you actually overturn this thing when it's so big, and when you go in, there's only a few people who are good? So in other words, the problem isn't just like the Trump administration doesn't select the right people. There aren't right people in that apparatus. You put a few right people in there, and they're in the middle of the darkness. They're in the middle of thousands of people who are actually just working for that apparatus. So someone like Tulsi comes in with courage, and then all of a sudden you are going to have whistleblowers coming to her because she just doesn't care. She's actually trying to do the job.
Right.
But what everyone has to ask themselves is, who, as we move forward and there's less and less excuse to actually structurally change things, who isn't acting? Because if they're not acting, right, if they're not actually moving forward to restructure these agencies, then you have to ask why, and we have to ask some really tough questions. And we have to explain. We all want to know, how does this thing operate? Are people being blackmailed in D.C., right? That kind of stuff. And that's why I think Mills is ultimately important, because he's sort of like a doofus in some ways, right? He's not very good, as you say, at some of what he does. But you imagine that if there's a lot smarter people, as you said, what's going on there, that they'd be a lot worse. They would appear on Fox News. They would say the right thing. But in fact, they would actually be operating against the interests of the American people.
I want to just say a couple of more things about Tulsi Gabbard, the director of the National Intelligence right now, is that when we go back a few years and we look at her voting record, before she ran for president, it was not good. In terms of, like, we look at these, think tanks that have all the scoring systems, she ranked below Hillary Clinton in terms of her voting record. She was left of Hillary. She was left of Joe Biden in her voting record. And suddenly she's the star of MAGA right now, the star of the America First agenda. Well, the way that her team explains that to me is that the politics don't exist in her job. And this is their words, she doesn't care which way the truth goes. She's just intent on getting the information out to the American people, and whatever it reveals, it reveals. Now, we talked about look, we all have our bias. We all have our bent. We lean one way or the other. We talked about earlier in this show being on the same team with some of the people that are disappointing us in Congress. I don't know philosophically if I'm on the same team with Tulsi, but I want to be the same type of person in my job and in my investigative journalism, is that I don't care where the truth takes me at the end of the day. And I've said this even about January 6th. I don't care whether it takes me to Trump's desk, Pelosi's desk, Mark Milley's desk, or all the above, just as long as I find where the truth is.
I will say, I think that you do have a lot of those characteristics in you that Tulsi does. And one of the things that I'm noticing just with Tulsi, you, all of us, well, Tulsi Gabbard, she was called a Russian agent by Hillary Clinton.
That's right.
She was put on the Quiet Skies program and saying, oh, you need extra air marshals to go follow you around when you're at the airport. So she's seen the weaponization of government come directly at her. You have seen the full force of the United States government come down on you after January 6th. So there are a lot of things. Like, we are just here trying to get the stories out to everybody, no matter where they go, right? It's not that we had an idea of where we were going to end up, even like with like the Cory Mills story, right? Like, when I came over to your house, I was like, listen, Radical Mufti, not looking great. But you said, well, maybe there's an explanation for this, right? Like, maybe there's a reason. But what we're just trying to do here is get to the bottom of the actual truth, no matter where it goes. And I think that's why all of us here are just so passionate and trying to figure out, like, what is the next step? What is the next investigation that we want to go do and bring to everybody here in the audience?
One of the things that I always say is that the government weaponized me against them. Tulsi, the government weaponized her against them. Congressman Barry Loudermilk, the bulldog on the January 6th issue, the government weaponized him because they accused him of giving a recon tour in the Capitol on the evening of January 5th of people that were going to become insurrectionists the next day. A complete lie, a sham. And he had to fight his way through it. The mainstream media still throws that up in his face to this day, 4.5 years later. And it was a complete lie. That's why he's a bulldog on January 6th. He wants to get to the bottom of it because he was personally affected by it. And I think maybe the three of us, Tulsi, Barry Loudermilk, myself, maybe we have that in common.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. I think you see a lot of people in your shoes at other places, like Matt Taibbi and all these people. They've all suffered. They all had skin in the game. Really important to have skin in the game because it means that they're serious. And so where the truth leads, finding it. The great thing about that is it makes life interesting because the truth is always stranger than fiction, and it's a wild and woolly place, and we've lost a sense of wonder for that. When we look about the landscape, because really for me it all starts with the fact that TV lies to you. TV lies to you. TV shows you a packaged universe where there's certain morals, there's certain ways in which everything's supposed to work. It's like West Wing. These shows, they just lie to you about how the world is. And if you don't realize that you live in 1930s Chicago all the time, and part of that's just human nature, then you don't really realize you're not going to be capable of being a great citizen. And if you don't realize how, if people say it's corrupt and all these elites are out there, okay, yeah, but let's explain what that means. Let's see what that means. And we have to understand exactly how that works if you want to do something about it.
Yeah, and if we went out and did a movie and just said, hell, here's a movie, J6, let's just put the plot line of J6, they'd be like, I don't know. Would I believe this? I don't know. If we put out the Cory Mills story, nobody would believe it. It's going to have to be something where we go back after everything's done and do a based on a true story and no, you have to believe us. This stuff really did actually happen.
Exactly. And that's true about everything that we're working on. Once you start pulling back the layers of the onion, it's stranger than fiction.
Oh, yeah. Every time. And that's what I love about life. I mean, that's what I love about these stories is it is always crazier than you could imagine in the movies. It's not neat and clean, but also we don't need fiction. Fiction's not going to help us solve the problem. To solve the problem, we need to know what the problem looks like, what it feels like, what actually is going on.
Blaze News Investigates, Season 2. There's a lot to look forward to, and we will be very happy to bring it to you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.